Okay, so apparently Ronald McDonald is in need of a self-defense fund for something. I'm not sure why. If it's because of the fact that they're marking their burger prices up higher, because a lot of people have said that in some places around the country that the hamburgers are getting very, very expensive and outside of their budget. So I'm wondering if Ronald McDonald's is going to be on the chopping block for franchise burger joints in the future. That's what I've been wondering. If Ronald McDonald is going to be on the chopping block. Now, the burger they've been under scrutiny a lot of times, but they've really hung in there because Ronald McDonald's is a very popular restaurant in the United States, a very popular fast food joint. So if you remember back in the day, we used to have Stuckey's. Does anyone remember Stuckey's? A lot of people have, and I've asked them about Stuckey's because I know I had a cousin that I went to visit when I was a kid, and she said her favorite place to go was Stuckey's. And she wanted her mom to stop at Stuckey's, and so there was a little portion of interstate. Now, for us who lived in rural America, it was quite um, it was quite a treat just to ride on the interstate because we heard of interstates, but we never went on them. We didn't have very many interstates. So Stuckey's was at the end of the interstate. We didn't have McDonald's like we do now. So we have a lot of McDonald's that is along interstates. And I'm wondering if Ronald McDonald's is going to be closing up because the burgers are getting too expensive. That's what I've been wondering. Is anybody else wondering that too? The same thing, if Ronald McDonald's is going to be closing up because of... No, that's not what I wanted to look at. Chat filter. All messages. Okay, we've got all messages to show up here now. And so I know that Germany has Ronald McDonald's, and I think China has Ronald McDonald's, but not every country around the world has Ronald McDonald's. I don't know if Pakistan has Ronald McDonald's or not, but the only way they can make extra money and keep raising the burger prices is to open up new Ronald McDonald's in foreign countries. I don't know if they'll like it or not. I know when they come to America, it seems like they like eating Ronald McDonald's. But the jury is out. I know that the Germans, they liked eating the McRib at Ronald McDonald's, and it seemed to go over well when I lived in Germany. There was quite a few Ronald McDonald's that opened up actually as Ronald McDonald's in Germany. There was a lot of them, and so that was the first time I'd ever had a McRib, was when I lived in Germany. And then I came to the United States, and there was a woman. Let me share this first, because she said they have it as special sometimes on the German economy, the McRib. And I told her, I said, well, my gosh, I've never seen the McRib in the United States. And even when I went back, I never saw it. And she's like, oh, that's because it's a special. They don't have a McRib all the time. And so I didn't know that was common for places like Ronald McDonald's to do, is to actually have a special and then not have it all the time on their menu. So it's kind of like when Ronald McDonald's has the Shamrock Shake. They have that around, what year? Well, it's usually around March Madness time frame. They'll have around St. Patrick's Day, they'll have the Shamrock Shake at McDonald's. And so they don't have it all the time. I think it's McDonald's. Hello, Sonia Morales. Hello. So they'll have the Shamrock Shake, around the Shamrock time of the year, and then they don't have it anymore. But they always have vanilla and chocolate. Now, their vanilla and chocolate shakes at McDonald's is pretty good. It's been a while since I've had them, but the last time I had the Shamrock Shakes at McDonald's, I thought they were pretty darn good. And they'd actually been making an effort with their McDonald's French fries to make them hot, and they weren't all greasy like they used to be. So Ronald McDonald's has done pretty good with their fries. It's just the prices have gotten more expensive, and so there's a lot of people projecting that the prices are going to be so high eventually that nobody's going to want to go there. And then they had long lines too at the Ronald McDonald's, and people were waiting in line because they didn't have very much staff. And I think they let their staff go. They had less staff and people working the windows at Ronald McDonald's. And so there was a lot of people there. And then it was kind of in a strange location. So you could see the Ronald McDonald's, but it was hard to get to. So it was back away from the rest of the restaurant. So you had to drive past the other restaurants. Then by the time you get to Ronald McDonald's, there's a huge line in the drive-thru. There's a huge line inside of the restaurant. And then you have to stand in line and you have to wait and wait and wait and wait for service because there's so many people there that are wanting to eat. Then you have to find someplace else to eat. And so what else? I was thinking about this with Ronald McDonald's and the big long lines and everything. This is what I was thinking about. Now, people who are working and they want to catch a quick bite before they go to work. And then they get to this place and they can't get their order within their 30 minutes. Now, a lot of, this is another thing too. So now the United States military at one time, I don't know if they do this anymore, but the United States military had 90 minutes for lunch. I had heard that they didn't do that anymore, but I don't know if that's true or not. Well, I had a boss who, he had 60 minutes for lunch. And I only had 30 minutes myself because I was a non-appropriated funding and he was appropriated. So he actually got more lunch time than what I got. But what he did, he worked it out. And what he said is, he says, I'm gone for an hour and you will be gone for an hour as well, even though you only get 30 minutes. So, but he himself was paid, though, through his lunch, I believe. Now, active duty military are paid through their lunch. They don't have to clock out. I don't think, did I have to clock out? No, I think what I did was, because I was the administrative staff, I was the supply clerk, and so I did the lunch thing, and so we didn't get paid for lunch. So we were there for 8 hours a day, and so technically we were there for 9 hours, and we didn't get paid for lunch time. So we did have to kind of clock out, and we were never paid for lunch ever. But we just did it on the paperwork. We didn't have a clock, though. And so when the people who were double checking our records, so if I would have put that we worked through lunch. Now, sometimes we did work through lunch, but we still adjusted it so it was like it showed up at lunchtime. So even if we worked overtime, though, I think we did get overtime. But typically we always got our lunch, though. We went to work at 7:30 and then we were done at 4. Sometimes we worked overtime, but it wasn't very often. Not that often, because with non-appropriated funding, but I was thinking that's one way to take away from people. So in the civilian world as well, when you cut back on lunch, because I know when I did retail, I only had 30 minutes for lunch. Now the other retail, if I worked over 5 hours, I got 30 minutes for lunch. If I worked less than 5 hours, I would just get 15-minute breaks. And then they would just tell me that I needed to eat my lunch during the 15 minutes. So I would get a 15-minute break. And they're like, well, do you really need lunch? And I'm thinking, I mean, that's what one of my female bosses said to me. She's like, do you really need lunch? That's what she said. Do you really need lunch? In a 5-hour period. That's what she asked me, if I really needed lunch. That's kind of like asking a person, well, do you really need to go to the bathroom? Do you really have to take that dump? Um, and so they had absolutely no tolerance and no compassion for their employees, working for J.C. Penney's and stuff like that. Now, I don't know about McDonald's. I never worked for them, but hospitality is hospitality, and I can't imagine the culture in any hospitality is good right now. It's got to be terrible. Because I remember how bad it was when I was a kid. And it was okay for me. I wanted to get out of the house. I was thinking like a kid. I wasn't thinking of it in terms of being an adult. So for me, it was, I wasn't thinking of it in long term. I had absolutely no idea what inflation was, with prices getting higher. I didn't even know I had absolutely no idea what the cost of living was when I was a kid. I didn't even know what minimum wage was when I got hired to my jobs. I didn't know how to negotiate a wage, and they're always telling people, oh, yeah, you can negotiate a wage. Well, are y'all teaching that to the kids to negotiate their wages? So I can't wait to hear about a 13-year or 14-year-old kid negotiating their wages and their salary so that they get $100,000 a year working at some fast food joint. I mean, shouldn't kids be able to negotiate wages? Because now hospitality wants to hire kids so they can pay them less. Well, that's the whole reason. So they can pay them less. Well, now all of a sudden, we got this influx of migrants who have come to the United States, and they're putting them in the jobs that kids used to do. They're putting them in the jobs that adults would do if they got paid a decent wage to be able to buy a house. But at the same time, we have inflation. Why are the prices getting higher? Well, I'm going to tell you that right now. That's because of money laundering. So they can launder money faster into the United States. So if you have higher prices all around, you can launder money into the United States faster. So if you have $5,000 a month apartments, you can launder money in faster. So the people doing this, they don't care about the general broad American public. They don't care whether you eat at a fast food place like McDonald's. They really don't care. If they have $15 burgers all across the board through the United States, they can launder money in faster. And they use the migrants to do it. So you don't have to have a whole lot of migrants to do this. You just have to have the appearance of some migrants to do this. You don't have to bring in 16 million or 25 million migrants into the United States to pull this off. You just have to have the appearance of a few of them. So if you plant a few migrants here and there around the country in all 50 states, which is what they said they're there now, then every state can money launder money. All the private business sector can launder money from foreign countries into the United States and avoid paying taxes, because that's what they're doing. I don't see it any other way, because everybody's asking the same question. Why is rent getting higher? Well, they've been doing this in New York City forever. In other places around the country, the prices were one low price all the time. And if prices crept up, it was very slow. And then sometimes the prices would go back down. But right now, like with the internet and these corporations and Wall Street companies who want to make money, it's just like the prices just keep going up. And it's like, when will it end? How come they can't place a cap on inflation? Now, I heard someone else ask this yesterday on TV, and they didn't get any flack back about it related to placing a cap on inflation or placing a cap on rent fixing and things like that. And now the people, they're calling it a Nazi move and a dictator move if there is another organization that comes in and takes over all the restaurants and controls them. Now, what I had called that being something where if the government took over, it would be kind of like the government does related to military bases. And so they keep things a low price all the time. Now, the private sector will call that a dictator move because they can't make money. They can't make money doing it. So if you have prices low, they can't launder money as fast. But if you raise prices high, they can launder money into the United States a lot faster. So that's not a popular thing among the business class because you hurt their money supply where they're getting their money from, be that in the United States off the taxpayers or be that money laundering from foreign countries. And I'm sure there's a lot of money laundering going on because, with the case that was in the state of Georgia with Fannie Willis and Nathan Wade, they were caught bringing money from the Caribbean into the United States. I mean, they brought the money in, however, they brought it in legally. They brought the money in. It was a lot of money, and they made several trips doing it. And so that's what's going on with the money laundering with any of the migrants. So the state of Georgia, when Trump called out Fannie Willis and Nathan Wade, they were money laundering. Now, Trump would be an expert at that because he would know about that. He's a rich guy. Now, you can't just say that people who are poor are money laundering because they're not. But Donald Trump is teaching people of the public how he money launders. That's what he's doing. He's teaching Letitia James up there in New York City how he money launders. He's teaching the politicians how he money launders. And so the basic principle from what I see, this is just my opinion, is that he can launder money faster by inflating the prices of rent. So if you own a tall building and your building has no people living in it, because that makes it easier on you to have no people living in the building, you can just have a big warehouse floor and say there's apartments in there, or there were planned projected apartments, because I know that happened in the home association area, but you count them as apartments anyway, and you launder a whole bunch of money in and you use that as your business. That's your business, is materializing money out of thin air, which is laundering money from the taxpayers in America or from foreign countries because you don't want to pay taxes on them. And that's the basic premise of Money Laundering 101. So there's lots and lots of different ways to launder money from other places. And that's the only thing that I can think it can be, by this consistent increase of prices, and even that in the food sector too, because I keep questioning, how in the world does this not violate the United States Constitution? I kind of wish Jeffrey would have came back. Jeffrey Epstein must be busy, or the impersonator. He looked like an impersonator. He was in his it looked like he was in a limousine last night. This guy he had on, it looked like he was in a limousine and he was sitting in the back seat, and it was kind of dark. There was no lights. There was very, very little light. He was in subdued dark. He had on very dark clothing. And so I was thinking this guy might have been part of the deep state that they talk about. Now, Jeffrey Epstein himself was well into Wall Street himself, and then he got canceled with whatever it was that he was doing, but he was best friends with Trump. Jeffrey Epstein was best friends with Trump, and so now the only thing, and so there's just a lot of missing pieces that it sounds like the government is trying to figure out. They don't know where they don't know where the kids are. They now the files for kids would be sealed. That's my understanding, is that when you have something as sensitive as sexual abuse with children, those files are sealed. They're private, they're closed. And that makes sense to me that they would be private and closed because it's nobody's business. These kids, if you made it public information, do you want the media hounding these kids for the rest of their adult life about what happened when they were a child? Because through the court system, it's public information that they were abused by someone like Jeffrey Epstein. Is that what you want? I mean, I'm pretty positive nobody wants that. They don't want to be hounded for the rest of their life about a traumatic experience because they were assaulted by someone, be that sexually or physically. They want to deal with it on their own without being hounded by the media. And we all know that our media in the United States is horrible, is horrific. I mean, I've never done that. I've never contacted anyone. The only thing I've done, I think, is contacted someone to ask him if something was true, and maybe I got a response, maybe I didn't. It was something just so minute related to Facebook and another content creator. And eventually, when people didn't answer, then it's like, okay, they don't answer, they don't want to talk about it. But see, the legacy media, what their intentions are is they're lazy. They're very lazy media. They don't want to make their own content. They don't want to write their own content. So with news is lazy media because they don't want to write anything. They want the American public to tell them about things. So, and then they want people to go on camera. That's the only reason they want people to go on camera is so they have a story. And then they want it to be related to government. And so that's what they always said. Well, it has to be something popular in the news. So all of it's related to the government and to news. Unless they're making up a fake story, then they will follow around with sources. Sources say, well, sources say this and sources say that. But at the same time, they're all across the internet telling YouTubers, it's like, well, we want to see your face. We want to see who you are. But at the same time, when they're caught and they don't want to give out their sources. So, and remember, a dead man doesn't talk. So with Jeffrey Epstein being gone, and the government can't find the children in that story either. So the government has lost the children who are migrants coming to the United States. They don't know how to get a hold of the children related. They have asked for the children who have been abused to come forward related to Jeffrey Epstein. So that has me thinking that nothing took place. There's no story. There's that the Jeffrey Epstein thing is made up. It's a fake story. And that Jeffrey Epstein is probably still alive. For that very reason. So when the government is asking for the children to come forward, it's just another usage of the word children in media. And so the word children in and of itself then can also artificially inflate usage of popularity of usage of children in media as well, so for that purpose, for that nefarious purpose, so it's just part of more of that name game and stuff like that related to children, so Jeffrey Epstein has been run through the wire, run through the shaft. Yeah. The others, they want, like Andrea Mitchell, she wants to look all frou-frou and goody two-shoes, and the same thing with that Erin Burnett or whatever. She was on CNN, or I don't know if she's still there or not. They want to look all goody two-shoes, and they want to run the rest of us on YouTube through the trash. And that's all they do. Disney wants to look all perfect and innocent while they run all YouTubers right on through the trash. So... and that's the tabloid. That's the perspective of the tabloid and the National Enquirer that has been around in this country, which that's a cancer and a pain in the neck to the American public. So when you just want to run YouTubers through the trash bin and trash YouTubers and have absolutely no respect for another source of media and opinions, different opinions and things like that, there's a problem with the existing legacy media. They're the problem. And Fox News is a part of the problem too. I'll tell you that right now. Fox News is a big part of the problem. They're not going to get off scot-free because they just have always played against each other. So today must be a really, really slow news day. It's got to be the summer doldrums, because I know from experience in my past YouTube history that July and August are very, very slow news. I mean, that's what they keep looking for, is breaking news. If it bleeds, it leads. If a story bleeds, it leads. Now, the government, it's my understanding, they're pissed off, and rightfully they have a right to be so, because there's all these frivolous lawsuits that have been going through the court system, and nothing is getting resolved, and they're catching Donald Trump in his lies. They're catching Donald Trump in all of his lies. Jerome Powell and I mentioned this on a live stream yesterday that I was watching C-SPAN, and I was watching, and the guy who kind of looked like Jeffrey Epstein last night in the back seat of a limousine, and he had on his mirrored sunglasses, and he was being really, really careful and orchestrated in the things that he was saying. I agreed with him in a big sense, because it's like Jerome Powell and Donald Trump were both wearing hard hats inside of this government building, and Jerome Powell had said Donald said that they were working on the building. That's what Donald said, and Jerome Powell said the building was finished 5 years ago. So they went into this area of this building, and it looked like they were working on the building. Maybe there was some construction going on. It's possible there was construction going on in the building, but that doesn't mean the building wasn't complete. You can have a building that is complete, but it has some additional construction taking place inside of the building. That doesn't mean the building is being built, but that's basically what Donald was saying, that the building was still being worked on 5 years later, and there's a bunch of overrun costs. And now, but at the same time, um, maybe we want to listen to and think about and let it marinate a little bit what Donald is talking about related to cost overruns. So they're doing additional work inside of the building, and then they're using that building to launder more money because there's cost overruns. And Donald did say there's cost overruns in this specific um, building. That's what he did say. There's a lot of cost overruns. And so Jerome Powell, um, he just told Donald that it was a lie, that the building wasn't complete, and so but we know that Donald and Jerome Powell are not getting along right now, and I found it kind of confusing and sort of funny. It's like, well, why would Jerome Powell go with Donald Trump to a building site to look at a building to begin with anyway? I mean, that didn't, that I found that confusing. It's like, but they had some kind of conference or something going on where Donald Trump and Jerome Powell were at this building site. Now, it was a very narrow view. They both had on hard hats. Um, and then they took their hard hats off at the end. Now, Jerome Powell, he looked about 15 years older than what he actually looks at the Fed chair meetings when they're having a Fed chair meeting. So Jerome Powell looked way, way older than what he looks in the Fed chair meetings. So I found that kind of strange, that he looked a lot older than what he looks when he's at his Fed chair meetings. Now, Donald Trump just looked the same. They don't have him aging really, really fast. But Jerome Powell, on the other hand, they made him look really old. And I wonder, this might be a publicity type of a thing, or a reason to say, because we already know that Donald doesn't like Jerome Powell very well. He wants to get rid of the Fed chair. Be that the Fed chair altogether. I'm not sure if he just wants to get rid of the Fed chair or if it's Jerome Powell. So if he can make Jerome Powell look really, really old, then that's a reason to get rid of him. Well, but think of the other side of this, though. Now, Jerome Powell could have an argument for discrimination, age discrimination in a job, because Donald does not like that Jerome Powell keeps saying that we have 2% inflation. Well, is that Jerome Powell's fault that we have 2% inflation? And I keep asking this same question. Is the United States government at fault because we have 2% inflation and more? Because the private sector is doing it. They keep raising the prices. Now, why is the private sector? They just consistently keep raising the prices. Be that a restaurant, be that a hotel, be that the home associations, be that the sublet apartments in New York City. Now, New York City is the capital. It's worse than Miami, I would say. I mean, both, one is just as bad as the other. Everyone said that Miami was built on drug money and money laundering. And I'm sure, without a doubt, that goes without saying that there's a lot of truth in that, because that's all we have had my whole life. Even when I was a kid, I was learning about money laundering. And I never did I imagine that thinking back and just remembering and thinking, well, yeah, we've always had money laundering. Well, they're laundering money from other foreign countries is what they're doing. And so I don't know what politicians are involved with that. Say back then, if Richard Nixon would have had any stakes in Wall Street, I have no idea if he did or not, or any of the past presidents. Now, it has come out that the spouses of politicians have a stake in Wall Street, and they're trading in Wall Street, which that can become a violation of manipulation of that politician through a spouse. So the spouses should have to give up their stakes in as well. Spouses and children shouldn't be having any big stakes. So if there, well, let me say this: if there is a giant stake with family members, then I would say that there has to be heavy scrutiny related to. So if you have a person who goes into politics and they have a family member who has huge, let's say millions of dollars in stakes, it could even be hundreds of thousands of dollars, because it doesn't take much money for something to become an integrity violation. So if you're in politics and you're in contact with a family member, then you should have to make the communications between your family member transparent in why you're talking to your family member as a politician. Because if you weren't talking to your family member before, just on a family member level, then why all of a sudden, out of the blue, are you talking to your family member more so now than what you were in the past? So what are you trying to get from your own family member who's in politics now that you weren't wanting to talk to your family member before in the past? That's what so so if you want checks and balances related to family, then there should be transparent conversations with people who have family members, because otherwise it's unfair for a person to be excluded from politics because they have a family member who has a big stake in investments on Wall Street and things like that. And so the conversations with the family members should be transparent. Because let me repeat this again. I'm going to repeat this again because I think it's important. So you have family. It's kind of the same principle as someone who doesn't have money. So you have family who really doesn't talk to their family member, but they came into some money or they got a good job. Now all of a sudden they want to talk to them. It's the same identical thing with politics. Well, so your family member is in politics. Now all of a sudden you got family who wants to talk to you a lot more. Well, why is that? You got people who want to network with you a lot more. Well, why is that? And that's the same thing with YouTube as well. You got people who want to network with you because you have created a network. I mean, you can actually create a network within yourself if you play it right, and you can take it outside of the narrow niche. That's what I've been hollering about, but other people have to figure that out themselves. The narrow niche versus expanding outside of the narrow niche. And so that's kind of what I'm working on, is doing things outside of the narrow niche, even though I might dabble in it from time to time. You guys can see I'm not that invested in a narrow niche, because I'm not actually even making any money out of any of this right now. And so I'm not going to do the narrow niche so wholeheartedly. And so if Google and YouTube wanted us to be in a narrow niche, I think that maybe they would somehow figure out a way to put people on a payroll, maybe. who have proven themselves in the past that they can do certain tasks and things related to the internet, but yet they don't want to do that though. It seems like they don't want to do that for some reason. I'm not sure why. Or, they just don't want a big payroll of people on a payroll, I guess. So we keep hearing that there are Google employees. Does Google have any employees at all, or are they all just mechanical? That's what I would ask. So, yeah, I guess that's where I'm going to leave it at that right now because I don't know what else to talk about. It's kind of a slow news day, it seems like. I was kind of and I turned on the TV for a little bit to see what was on the TV. It's just commercials. That's all it is. It's just commercials. There's really nothing, absolutely nothing. Everything is a repeat on cable TV right now. Oh, I do like the show Whose Line Is It Anyway? I think all of that TV is old. None of it's new from what I've seen. It's all repeats. And so they've got these guys. Let's see here. Oh, 2016 is when it was on. They've got on Caitlin Doubleday. It's comedy 2016. Aisha Tyler, Ryan Stiles, Caitlin Doubleday, and Jonathan Magnum. And so that was the one I was always saying was the improv show, which it is they give them tasks to do, which is, it's really, I always thought it was a funny show. And that's kind of where I learned about improv was from the show Whose Line Is It Anyway? I called it the improv show. I never could remember its name, but it went by Whose Line Is It Anyway? And so they would give them tasks to do, and then it would end up being funny is what would happen. And it would be funny and ridiculous at the same time. So, okay. Well, I think I'm done. Today's a slow Friday, it looks like. There's really nothing exciting happening. We're in the doldrums of summer. Kids are getting ready to go back to school. I didn't even look at Google today to see if their website had anything on here. Nope, there's absolutely nothing there. Down at the bottom is applying AI towards science and the environment. We can take applying AI to help solve society's biggest challenges and improve lives. Well, we need human beings. I mean, we can use AI to do that. However, you need a human being who is willing to take it further and not just say, oh, look, this is great for corporations. They make all this money. And we can bring in a whole bunch of money and make these corporations sustainable and profess that they're going to hire people for jobs. But it's like, well, where is the money going and where are the jobs at? Because the jobs just don't seem to exist. And so we do have a big problem related to what they call the green energy. When you build larger cities, you actually create more of a greenhouse effect, because of the fact that you just end up with more carbon pollution around the big city, and you create a big sore on the planet Earth because you've got a whole bunch of houses and you've created concrete jungles instead of letting the Earth breathe. It's like the brick roads. I've always said they probably absorb water a lot better than concrete roads. And, but there's always going to be work, though. I mean, societies are always going to band together. There's always going to be work for people, with job creation. It's just that what's the value of a human being? A lot of people say there's no value. There should be no value, but you will pay a human being to do work. So if you pay a human being $1 to do work 100 years ago, and right now you want to pay human beings $50 to do work for the same job, well, what has increased? What has caused that human being to be more valuable? Because you actually have human beings that are not as valuable. So basically, you're using human beings for trafficking, money, and you're treating the rest of the human beings as slaves. So you have created a tier class system of upper class, middle class, and lower class, and that's what we've been dealing with, and that's what we've been talking about for many, many years, over 10 years, is that you've created a class warfare of people against each other. So it's the rich folks versus the poor folks, the politicians versus the rich folks. The Democrats appear to be that they're against the rich folks, but maybe they are, maybe they're not. It's really confusing. Then you've got the legacy media against the government and against the politics. And so they're saying, oh, we're happy. We took out the Democrats. It's like, okay, well, yeah, we've said we don't want any political parties. We don't want the Republicans either, but yet they're not going against the Republicans because they're all beholden to the side of Donald Trump right now. They're part of the clown car. That's what they're part of. And so, okay, I'm going to end this. I know I said I was going to a while ago, but I'm going to end it this time.